The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly on the Grand Parkway, on that stretch cutting through the working-class outskirts of London, before disappearing towards the countryside. The asphalt steamed under the December heat, and the smell of dry earth mingled with the diesel fumes of the noisy trucks passing by. There, on a dusty shoulder near a cluster of simple houses, a man wearing an Italian suit, crumpled by despair, walked from door to door, holding a poster that trembled in his hands. The image printed on the paper showed the face of an 8-year-old girl, with brown hair and sweet eyes beneath the word that hammered in his chest, missing. Robert Miller Carlson, 52 years old, owner of one of the country's largest construction companies, never imagined he would be there, in that place his urban projects would never reach, begging for information about his own daughter. 9 days ago his life had collapsed like a building without structure. 9 days since Isabella, his little Bella, had vanished from the mansion in Regent's Grove without a trace. 9 days of frantic searches, of reward offers reaching absurd figures, of news reports, of sleepless nights scouring every corner of the city. His throat was dry, not just from the heat but from the exhaustion of repeating the same question hundreds of times. "Have you seen this girl? Please, any information. She's 8 years old. She was wearing a light blue dress when she left. Please." People looked at him with pity, shook their heads negatively, and he moved on, each rejection weighing like lead on his shoulders. The billionaire who built skyscrapers was there, reduced to a desperate father who had nothing left but hope. It was then that, as he approached a makeshift structure of wood and tarp, a thin, young woman no more than 16 appeared at the gate. She wore simple clothes, faded from use and sun, and her bare feet were marked by the red earth of the ground. Her eyes, however, had an intensity that made Robert stop. The girl looked at the poster he was holding, and for an instant that seemed to last an eternity, her expression changed. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. "I know her," the young woman said, her firm voice cutting through the distant traffic noise. Robert felt his heart pound, his legs almost gave out. Where is she? Please take me to her." His voice came out strangled, desperate, the words stumbling over each other. The young woman didn't move immediately. She studied Robert with a caution he didn't expect, as if evaluating whether she could trust him. "She's fine, she's safe. But before I take you to her, you need to understand one thing. She wasn't lost. She ran away." The word struck Robert like lightning. "Ran away? That doesn't make sense. Why would my daughter run away? She had everything. A mansion with a heated pool, a room full of toys, imported clothes, the best schools. What more could a child want?" He opened his mouth to protest, but the young woman continued, her voice now softer, almost maternal. "She came here alone, walking. She was scared, but she didn't want to go back. She said that in that big house, she felt more alone than on the street. We took her in because it seemed like no one else was doing that there." Robert staggered back, as if punched in the stomach. The young woman's words echoed in his mind, each syllable an accusation. Alone. No one else was doing that. He had always believed he was doing his best for Isabella. After Marina, his wife, had passed away 3 years ago, a victim of a sudden illness that left no chance, Robert plunged into work as a way to survive the pain. Every contract signed, every new venture, was an attempt to build a solid future for his daughter. He wanted her to never need anything, to have all the opportunities he didn't have as a child, growing up in a poor district in the East End. But there, on that dusty road, in front of a teenager who barely had enough to eat, Robert began to understand that he had failed in the essential. He had given everything, except the one thing Isabella truly needed, himself. "Please, take me to her," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "I need to see her. I need to ask for forgiveness." The young woman nodded slowly. "I'll take you, but you need to promise one thing. When you see her, you won't argue with her. You won't make her feel guilty. She's suffered enough already." Robert agreed with a frantic nod of his head, unable to speak. He followed the young woman through a labyrinth of narrow alleys between wooden shacks and exposed brick houses. Children played barefoot in the dirt. Women hung clothes on makeshift lines. Men chatted in small groups. It was a world completely different from his own, a world he helped build through his real estate ventures, but had never truly seen up close. The irony was not lost on him. He built buildings for the rich, while people like these lived on the margins, invisible. The further he walked, the more Robert realized how distant he was from his own daughter's reality. He didn't know the name of her best friend at school. He didn't know her favorite color. He didn't know if she was still afraid of the dark, like when she was younger. He simply presumed that as long as the bills were paid and the toys kept coming, everything would be fine. What a monumental mistake. What imperfect blindness. The young woman stopped in front of a structure that could barely be called a house. It was a shack made of repurposed pieces of wood, with a blue tarp roof secured by rocks and ropes. "She's in here. With my younger sister, they've become friends." Robert took a deep breath, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions. Fear, relief, guilt, shame, all mixed into an impossible knot to untangle. He nodded, and the young woman opened the tarp entrance. The afternoon sunlight streamed into the dark interior, revealing two small figures sitting on the dirt floor. One of them was Isabella. She was thinner, her face smudged with dirt, the blue dress she wore the day she ran away now torn and stained. But her eyes, those eyes Robert had seen every time he closed his eyelids for the past 9 days, shone with a light he hadn't seen in a long time. She was alive. She was safe. And surprisingly, she was smiling as she played with another girl, even thinner and dirtier than her. When Isabella looked up and saw him standing at the entrance, her smile disappeared. Fear returned to her eyes, and she recoiled as if expecting a reprimand. Robert felt his heart shatter into a million pieces. His own daughter was afraid of him, not afraid of being hit or yelled at, but something worse. Afraid of disappointing him, of being a nuisance, of not being enough. "Bella," he whispered, his voice failing. He knelt on the dirt floor, not caring about the expensive suit he was ruining. "Please forgive me. Forgive me for everything." Tears began to roll, silent and liberating. Tears he hadn't allowed since Marina's funeral. Tears that carried 3 years of repressed pain, of absence, of accumulated mistakes. Isabella looked at him, confused, still withdrawn. She wasn't used to seeing her father cry. She wasn't used to seeing him vulnerable. "Daddy?" she murmured, her voice small and uncertain. Robert opened his arms, a wordless invitation. "Please, let me hug you. Let me fix this." Isabella hesitated. She looked at her friend next to her, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then slowly she stood up and walked to her father. As Robert enveloped her in his arms, feeling her small, fragile body against his chest, he knew his life had changed forever. Nothing else mattered. Not the million-pound contracts, not the Entrepreneur of the Year awards, not the dinners with investors. None of it was worth the pain he had caused, the emptiness he had allowed to grow. "I'm going to change, Bella. I promise. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be the father you deserve." Isabella didn't answer, but he felt her small arms tighten around his neck, and that was answer enough. It was a beginning, a fresh start, and Robert was determined not to waste this second chance. 2 weeks before that reunion in the outskirts, Robert Miller Carlson's life was an impeccable showcase of success. In his 300-square-meter penthouse overlooking Hyde Park, everything was designed to impress. Italian marble on the floor, works of art on the walls, furniture by renowned designers. The infinity pool on the balcony gave the sensation of being able to dive directly into the London sky. It was the kind of place that appeared in decoration and architecture magazines, always accompanied by glowing articles about the visionary entrepreneur who had transformed a small family construction company into a real estate empire. To outsiders, Robert had achieved the British dream. The son of a bricklayer and a seamstress, he grew up sharing a tiny room with 3 siblings in a 2-room house in Peckham. From childhood, he helped his father on weekends, carrying bricks and mixing cement. Dreaming of the day he wouldn't have to get his hands dirty anymore, he attended public school, scribbled imaginary house plans in his notebooks, and with great effort, managed to get a scholarship to study civil engineering at university. It was there that he met Marina, an architecture student with a luminous smile and dreams as big as his own. They married young, working together to build every brick of their future. Marina was the creativity, he was the execution. Together, they were unstoppable. And when Isabella was born on a cold June morning, Robert felt that his family was finally complete. He promised himself that this girl would never go through the difficulties he had faced. She would have everything. But life has a cruel way of changing plans. 3 years ago, Marina began to experience constant headaches. At first, they thought it was stress, overwork. When they finally sought medical help, it was too late. The diagnosis came like a sentence: an aggressive, inoperable tumor. Within months, Marina was gone, taking with her the light of the house. Isabella was only 5 years old when she last saw her mother, sleeping in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Robert was never the same. He plunged into work with an obsession that bordered on self-destruction. Every project was an escape. Every closed deal was an attempt to fill the void. He expanded the company, bought competitors, signed contracts in 3 different counties. Carlson & Sons Construction was everywhere, and so was he. Meetings at 7 in the morning, business dinners at 9 at night, trips to London, Edinburgh, Manchester. He told himself he was doing it for Isabella, to secure her future. But the truth, which he never admitted, was that being at home, in those rooms that still echoed Marina's absence, was unbearable. Isabella, for her part, learned to be invisible. She woke up, was dressed by the nanny, went to the most expensive private school in the area, returned, did her homework alone, ate dinner alone, went to sleep alone. On weekends, her father promised to take her to the park, to the cinema, anywhere. But an unforeseen event always arose. An important client, an emergency on a construction site, a negotiation that couldn't wait. Isabella stopped asking. She stopped waiting. She simply accepted that this was her reality. A rich girl who had everything except company. The only conversations they had were quick, functional. "How was school today?" "Fine, Daddy." "Do you need anything?" "No, Daddy." "Are you happy?" "Yes, Daddy." Robert never realized that all the answers were mechanical, rehearsed, said only so as not to worry him. He never realized that his daughter was slowly fading away, transforming into a silent shadow that circulated through the luxurious rooms like a ghost. It was in this scenario of absences that Patricia Anderson appeared. Robert met her at a charity event promoted by London entrepreneurs, one of those dinners where you paid £10,000 for a plate, and the money supposedly went to some noble cause. She was stunning in a red dress, animatedly chatting with a group of investors. Tall, blonde, with a practiced smile and a demeanor of someone accustomed to the spotlight, Patricia seemed exactly the type of woman who belonged in that world. They began to talk, and Robert found himself fascinated. Patricia had answers for everything, knew exactly what to say in every situation, knew important people, spoke of international travel with enviable naturalness. She worked, according to herself, as an image consultant for executives, helping entrepreneurs build their personal brands. She was sophisticated, cultured, and seemed genuinely interested in Robert, or at least that's what he wanted to believe. Loneliness is a terrible counselor. Robert, who for 3 years had not allowed anyone close enough to hurt him, saw in Patricia a possibility of a fresh start. She was different from Marina, and perhaps that was exactly what he needed. Someone who didn't carry painful memories, who wasn't part of that past he was trying to leave behind. They began to meet. Dinners, events, weekend trips. Patricia was always impeccable, always said the right things, always made him feel like he was in control of his life again. 4 months later, when Patricia suggested they get married, Robert barely hesitated. He told himself that Isabella needed a maternal figure, someone who would be present when he couldn't be. Patricia had met the girl a few times, always showing herself to be attentive and affectionate. Isabella was shy, withdrawn, but Patricia said that was normal, that she would gradually win the girl's trust. Robert believed her. He wanted to believe her. The wedding was discreet, only for close friends and family, or rather, what was left of it. Robert's siblings attended but found the haste strange. His mother, Mrs. Benedicta, a 70-year-old woman with more wisdom than diplomas, looked at Patricia with suspicion throughout the ceremony. Afterward, in private, she pulled her son aside. "Robert, my son, are you sure about this? You barely know this woman. And Bella, did you ask her what she thinks?" Robert brushed aside his mother's concerns with a tired smile. "Mom, you worry too much. Patricia is a good woman. It will be good for Isabella to have someone at home. I can't be there all the time." Mrs. Benedicta sighed, shaking her head. "You're running away, my son, running from the pain. But one day it will catch up with you, and then it will be worse." He didn't listen. He thought his mother was being overly cautious, stuck to old values that marriage needed years of courtship. The modern world was different, more practical, and Patricia seemed too perfect to be a mistake. The first few days after the wedding were calm, almost idyllic. Patricia took command of the house with military efficiency. She reorganized the decor, replaced staff, established new routines. Robert saw this as a sign that she was settling in, putting down roots. He didn't realize that each change further pushed away Marina's memories, erasing another piece of the past that Isabella still clung to. With Isabella, Patricia maintained a mask of kindness whenever Robert was around. "Hello, my love. How was school? Shall we choose a pretty outfit for you? Do you want me to comb your hair?" All said with a perfect smile, a melodious voice. Robert felt relieved, believing he had made the right choice. But as soon as he left for work, the mask fell. Patricia didn't yell, didn't hit, didn't do anything that would leave visible marks. Her cruelty was more subtle, more refined. She simply ignored Isabella. She treated the girl like an inconvenient piece of furniture in the way. When Isabella tried to talk, Patricia responded with monosyllables without taking her eyes off her phone. When the girl wanted to show a drawing from school, Patricia sighed with impatience, saying she was busy with important things. The house rules changed drastically. Isabella could no longer play in the living room because it messed up the decor. She couldn't eat in the kitchen because it made a mess. She had strict schedules for everything: waking up, eating, studying, sleeping. Any deviation was met with a cold, cutting reprimand. "Don't you have any consideration for anyone? Your father works so hard to give you everything, and all you do is make a mess. What an ungrateful girl." Isabella, at only 8 years old, began to feel guilty for existing. She tried to be perfect, not to make noise, not to ask for anything, not to draw attention, but nothing was ever enough. Patricia always found something to criticize. Her hair was messy, her clothes were mismatched. She was eating too slowly. She was talking too loudly. She was being selfish for wanting her father's attention when he came home tired from work. And when Isabella tried timidly to talk to her father about how Patricia treated her, he was always too exhausted to understand. "Bella, you need to understand that Patricia is trying to help. She wants you to become a polite, responsible girl. Be grateful to have someone who cares about you. I can't do everything alone." Each time she heard this, Isabella closed herself off a little more. She understood that her complaints were seen as ingratitude, as a whim. So she stopped trying. She kept everything inside, that overwhelming weight of loneliness and rejection, until it couldn't fit anymore. The last straw came on a muggy Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Robert and Patricia's wedding. The London sky was heavy with grey clouds that promised a storm, but the rain stubbornly refused to fall, leaving the air heavy and suffocating. Robert had travelled to Edinburgh that morning for a meeting with investors for a new waterfront development in Leith. He wouldn't return until the weekend. It was always like this: sudden trips, unavoidable meetings, commitments that couldn't wait. Isabella was in her room, the only place in the house where she still felt minimally safe. It was an enormous room, larger than the living room of many houses, decorated with custom-made furniture in shades of pink and white. There was a princess bed with a canopy, a bookshelf full of books she never had time to read, a large-screen television that was rarely turned on. But what Isabella liked most about that room were the drawings scattered on the floor, sheets and sheets of white paper covered with colored pencils and markers representing her memories. She had been drawing obsessively in recent months. She drew her mother, always smiling, always beautiful, with that long hair that smelled of lavender. She drew the Sundays when Marina was still alive, when the three of them went to the park and had picnics on the grass. She drew the old house, smaller and cozier than that cold mansion where they lived now. Each drawing was an attempt to keep alive the memory of a time when she felt loved, when she wasn't a bother, when her existence brought joy and not inconvenience. That afternoon, she was finishing a special drawing. It was Marina's birthday approaching, and Isabella wanted to make something beautiful. She paid attention to every detail: the yellow dress her mother wore to parties, the pearl necklace her father had given her as a gift, the smile that lit up any room. Beside Marina, Isabella drew herself, small and happy, holding her mother's hand. It was a scene from a past that seemed increasingly distant, almost unreal, as if it had happened to someone else. The sound of firm footsteps in the corridor pulled her from her concentration. Isabella immediately recognized Patricia's walk, that click of high heels that always announced something unpleasant. The door opened without anyone knocking. Patricia entered the room with an irritated expression, her eyes scanning the environment as if inspecting a battlefield. "What is this mess, Isabella? Didn't I tell you I didn't want paper scattered on the floor? This house isn't a rubbish dump." Isabella recoiled. "Sorry, Patricia. I was just drawing. I'll put everything away now." Patricia advanced into the room, her heels echoing on the wooden floor. She began to collect the drawings from the floor with abrupt movements, crumpling some in the process. Isabella felt her heart quicken. Those drawings were all she had of her mother, the only tangible memories of a better time. "Be careful, please," Isabella murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "They're special to me." Patricia stopped, looking at the papers in her hands. She studied the drawings with an expression of disdain. "All this is about your mother, isn't it? You live trapped in the past, child. That's not healthy. Your father has moved on, he's gone forward. Why can't you do the same?" Isabella felt tears burn her eyes, but she tried hard not to let them fall. She had learned that crying in front of Patricia was seen as weakness, as manipulation. "I just wanted to remember her. She was my mother." "Was," Patricia emphasized the word with cruelty. "She isn't anymore. I'm the woman of the house now, and you need to accept that. These memories only hurt you. You need to grow up, mature." Without warning, Patricia walked to the wastebasket in the corner of the room and threw the drawings inside. Not all of them, just a few. But among them was the drawing Isabella had just finished, that special one for her mother's birthday. The girl jumped up, her heart in pieces. "No, please, don't throw them away. I need them." Patricia turned to her with an icy expression. "You don't need any of this. You have a beautiful house, expensive clothes, food on the table. Your father works like a dog to give you all this, and all you do is cry for someone who's already gone. This is ingratitude, Isabella, pure ingratitude." Isabella was paralyzed, Patricia's words hitting her like arrows. She wanted to scream, she wanted to defend herself, she wanted to say that she wasn't ungrateful, that she just wanted to be loved, that she just wanted someone to see her. But the words wouldn't come out. Her voice was stuck somewhere deep in her throat, suffocated by months of silencing. Patricia left the room without another word, leaving the door open behind her. Isabella ran to the wastebasket and rescued what she could, but the special drawing was torn in half, ruined. She held the pieces of paper in her trembling hands, seeing her mother's smiling face divided, broken. Something inside her also broke at that moment. A decision began to form in her mind, still hazy, still frightening, but increasingly inevitable. She couldn't stay there anymore. In that huge empty house where her own presence was seen as an inconvenience, where her memories were treated as rubbish, where she was constantly reminded that she wasn't wanted. Isabella was 8 years old, but the pain she carried was much greater than her age. And that afternoon, with her mother's torn drawing in her hands, she decided she deserved more. She deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. Night fell slowly over London. Isabella didn't go down for dinner, claiming she wasn't hungry. Patricia didn't even bother to insist, content to have a meal without her stepdaughter's silent presence. Isabella waited in bed, pretending to sleep, until she heard Patricia's footsteps climbing the stairs towards the master bedroom. The house plunged into silence, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning and the occasional sound of cars on the avenue below. When the clock struck midnight, Isabella got up. Her heart was beating so fast that she was sure the sound would echo through the corridors and wake Patricia. With slow, careful movements, she put on a sweatshirt over her pajamas, put on her most comfortable trainers, and grabbed her school backpack. Inside, she put only the essentials: a change of clothes, her wallet with some money she had saved from allowances, a bottle of water, and the framed photo of her mother that was on her bedside table. She looked around the room one last time, that space that should have been her refuge but had become just another luxurious prison. Going down the stairs was the hardest part. Each step creaked. Each sound seemed amplified 1,000 times in the silence of the early morning. Isabella stopped several times, her heart almost pounding out of her chest, waiting to hear the bedroom door open and Patricia's voice calling, but nothing happened. The house remained silent, indifferent to her escape. The front door had an electronic lock, but Isabella had seen the code typed hundreds of times. She pressed the numbers with trembling fingers, and the mechanism unlocked with a soft click. The night air hit her like a cold slap, and for an instant she hesitated. She could still go back, go upstairs, lie in bed, pretend nothing had happened, but then she remembered the torn drawing, the cruel words, the months of loneliness. No, she wouldn't go back. Isabella began to walk. She had no plan, didn't know where to go. She just knew she needed to get away from that house, from that neighborhood of mansions and high walls, where everything was perfect on the outside and empty on the inside. She walked through the deserted streets of Regent's Grove, passing gated communities and guardhouses, with sleepy security guards who paid no attention to a girl walking alone. The sky finally opened and the rain began to fall. First, just a few scattered drops, then a furious storm that drenched Isabella in a matter of minutes. She kept walking, trembling with cold but determined. The rain washed away her tears, mingled with them, and there was something liberating in that. It was as if she was being purified, cleansed of all the accumulated pain. Hours passed. Isabella no longer knew how long she had been walking. Her feet hurt, her clothes were sticking to her body, and exhaustion was beginning to weigh her down. The adrenaline of the escape was giving way to fear. What had she done? Where was she going? What would happen when the sun rose and everyone realized she was gone? It was then that she saw the first simple houses, different from the mansions she knew. Wooden shacks, some unplastered brick constructions, dirt roads, turned into muddy paths by the rain. She had reached the working-class district without even realizing it, guided only by an instinct to get away from what she knew. There, wet and exhausted, Isabella finally stopped. Her legs gave way, and she sat on a concrete step under a small canopy that offered some protection from the rain. "I don't know what to do now," she whispered to no one, hugging her backpack to her chest. Her mother's photo was inside, protected. It was all that mattered. Dawn arrived slowly, tinging the sky with orange hues that mixed with the grey of the clouds that had not yet completely dissipated. The rain had stopped a few hours ago, leaving behind huge puddles and a smell of wet earth that permeated everything. Isabella was still sitting on that step, hugging her backpack, her body aching from cold and exhaustion. She had dozed off a few times, but fear kept her in a constant state of alert. Every noise made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. The first people began to circulate through the community, men with lunchboxes on their way to work, women opening doors to sweep away rainwater, children running, barefoot through the alleys. Isabella huddled even tighter, trying to become invisible. She didn't know how these people would react to seeing her there, a girl clearly out of her natural environment, with clothes that, even wet and dirty, were visibly expensive. It was then that a soft voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Isabella looked up and saw a girl standing in front of her. She seemed to be about 15 or 16, was too thin, with patched clothes and bare feet marked by calluses. But her eyes had a kindness that Isabella hadn't seen in a long time. A genuine kindness, without ulterior motives, without demands. I... Isabella tried to speak, but her voice came out hoarse and trembling. I don't know. I think so. The girl knelt beside her, studying her carefully. You're wet and shivering. How long have you been here? Do you live nearby? Isabella shook her head, unable to form complete sentences. Tears began to fall again, silent and persistent. The girl asked no more questions. She simply extended her hand. Come, you need to dry off and eat something. You can trust me. My name is Julia. Isabella hesitated for only a second before accepting the outstretched hand. There was something in Julia's voice, in her posture, that inspired trust. She got up, her legs wobbly, and followed the girl through a labyrinth of narrow alleys. People passing by looked with curiosity, but no one asked anything. There, it seemed, everyone took care of their own pains and difficulties. Julia led her to a precarious structure at the end of a dead-end alley. It was a shack made of repurposed pieces of wood, old plywood, and a blue tarp that served as a roof. There was no proper door, just a faded fabric curtain that swayed in the wind. But when Isabella entered, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth. Inside, the space was tiny. A thin mattress on the floor covered with worn but clean sheets, some market crates that served as shelves, a paint can transformed into a makeshift table, and sitting on the mattress, playing with dolls made of cloth and sticks, was a girl even smaller than Isabella. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She had Julia's same eyes, the same delicate features that malnutrition couldn't completely erase. This is Clara, my younger sister, Julia introduced with evident pride in her voice. Clara, look, I brought us a friend. Clara looked up and smiled, a smile so pure and innocent that it made Isabella's heart ache. Hi, do you want to play with me? Isabella couldn't answer, still absorbing that reality so different from her own. Julia took an old but clean towel from one of the boxes and handed it to her. Dry your hair and take off that wet sweatshirt. I'll make you some hot tea. Isabella obeyed mechanically, watching Julia light an improvised stove made of. Fill a can and begin to heat water in a dented kettle. The simplicity of everything was shocking for someone accustomed to state-of-the-art appliances and always available maids. But there was something more there, something the mansion didn't have: human warmth. What's your name? Julia asked as she put cheap tea bags into the hot water. Isabella, but you can call me Bella. Bella, pretty name. Julia handed her a cracked mug full of hot tea. Clara, go to the chest and get Conceição's blouse for Bella to wear while her clothes dry. Clara obeyed promptly, happy to help. She brought a long-sleeved blouse, worn but warm, and Isabella exchanged her wet sweatshirt for it. It was too big, smelled of coconut soap, and was the most comforting thing she had felt in months. Julia sat beside her, watching her carefully. You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to, but if you need to talk, I'm here to listen. Without judgment. Isabella held the mug of tea with both hands, feeling the warmth spread through her cold fingers. And then, for the first time in a long time, she spoke. She told about her mother who had passed away, about her father who was always absent, about the cruel stepmother who treated her as an inconvenience. She told about the torn drawings, about the crushing loneliness, about the feeling of not belonging anywhere. The words came out in sobs, disorganized, but Julia listened attentively without interrupting. When Isabella finally finished, exhausted by the confession, Julia remained silent for a few moments. Then she spoke, her voice laden with a wisdom that went beyond her few years. You ran away because you were looking for something you lost, a place where you feel seen, heard, loved. I understand. That... Isabella looked at her, surprised. And you? Are you running from something too? Julia gave a sad smile. Not exactly. Our mother left us 3 years ago. She just walked away one day and never came back. We lived in a government shelter, but it was horrible. Children being hit by caregivers, spoiled food, no one caring about anyone. When I turned 14, I decided we would leave there. I took Clara and we came here. I built this shack with wood I scavenged. I found some odd jobs collecting recyclables and we get by. It's not much, but it's ours. And here no one hits us, no one yells, we are free." Isabella absorbed those words, feeling a mixture of admiration and guilt. Julia, with so little, had more courage and determination than she ever would. And yet, there was no bitterness in her voice, only acceptance and a silent strength that came from having survived the worst. Clara approached timidly, holding one of her cloth dolls. "Bella, do you want to stay here with us? Julia always says that the more we share, the more we have." Isabella looked at the two sisters, at that precarious shack that barely protected them from the elements, and something inside her calmed down. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a burden, an inconvenience. There, in that place so different from everything she knew, she was welcome. "If you'll let me, I'd love to stay." Julia smiled, a decision made. "Then stay, but you need to understand the rules. Here, we share everything. Food, blankets, work, nothing is free. If you're going to stay, you'll have to help. Can you do that?" Isabella nodded vigorously. "I can. I promise I'll help with everything." And so began a completely new routine for Isabella. In the following days, she learned what it meant to live with the bare essentials. Julia woke up before sunrise to collect recyclable materials, and Isabella began to accompany her, helping to separate cardboard, cans, bottles. The work was exhausting. Her delicate hands soon became calloused. Her back ached from carrying heavy bags. But there was purpose in it. There was usefulness. She was no longer that useless child who only got in the way. Clara, despite her young age, also had her duties. She fetched water from the communal tap, helped wash clothes in the shared laundry sink, and kept the shack organized. The three formed a small team, each contributing as they could. At night, they shared the little they had: bread with margarine, sometimes a boiled egg, occasionally a chicken stew when the day's collection had been good. For Isabella, all of it was surreal. She who had always had everything now had nothing, and paradoxically felt more complete. Julia and Clara treated her as an equal, as family. There were no constant criticisms, no absurd demands. There was only companionship, shared laughter, stories told by candlelight when the improvised power failed. One night, as the three were lying on the shared mattress, Clara hugging Isabella on one side and Julia on the other, Isabella whispered in the dark, "Thank you for taking me in. You barely know me, but you treat me better than the people who should love me." Julia squeezed her hand. "Family isn't just blood, Bella. Family is who stays, who cares, who shares. And now you're part of our family, no matter what happens." Isabella felt tears stream down, but they were different tears. Not of pain, but of gratitude. There, in that shack that barely protected them from the rain or cold, she had found what her mansion never offered, a true home. Robert received the call in the middle of an important meeting with investors in Edinburgh. He was presenting plans for a new residential complex when his cell phone began to vibrate insistently. Normally he would ignore it, but something in the pattern of repeated calls made his paternal instinct kick in. He excused himself and answered, stepping out of the conference room. It was Patricia, her voice overflowing with a concern that seemed almost too theatrical. "Robert, you need to come back. Now Isabella has disappeared. She's not anywhere in the house. I've looked in every room, asked the security guards. No one saw anything. I don't know what to do." Robert's world stopped at that instant. Patricia's words echoed in his mind, but they made no sense. Disappeared? How could she disappear? Isabella was an 8-year-old girl, shy, who barely left her room. How could she simply vanish? He cancelled everything immediately. The meeting, the week's commitments, everything ceased to matter. He took the first flight back to London, the 2-hour journey seeming to last an eternity. His brain worked in frantic mode, imagining increasingly terrifying scenarios. Kidnapping. Had someone broken into the house? Had she hurt herself and was somewhere needing help? Each possibility was worse than the last. When he arrived home, he found Patricia impeccably dressed, made up, receiving the police in the living room with the controlled posture of a hostess. Something about that scene bothered Robert, but he couldn't identify what. Perhaps it was the fact that Patricia seemed more concerned with maintaining appearances than genuinely desperate. Or perhaps it was just his own guilt distorting his perception. The police asked the usual questions. When was the last time they saw the girl? Did she have a favorite place? Were there signs of forced entry? Robert answered mechanically, but his mind was elsewhere. He went up to Isabella's room, needing to see with his own eyes, needing to understand. The room was exactly as it always was, organized, clean, too perfect for an 8-year-old child. But there was something different. Robert noticed immediately. The drawings Isabella always kept scattered on the floor were no longer there. He opened the wardrobes, rummaged through the drawers, looked for the papers his daughter spent hours creating. He found some, crumpled in the rubbish, torn, discarded. His heart tightened. He went downstairs with the torn drawings in his hands, looking for Patricia. He found her in the kitchen, serving coffee to the police officers. "Patricia, what happened to Isabella's drawings? Why are they torn in the rubbish?" Patricia turned to him with a barely disguised expression of irritation. "Robert, now is not the time for this. She had made a mess in her room. I asked her to tidy up. Some papers accidentally ended up in the rubbish. This has nothing to do with her disappearance." But it did. Robert knew it did. He knew little about his daughter, but he knew those drawings were important to her. They were her way of connecting with her mother's memory, of keeping alive something he himself had tried to bury. If Patricia had thrown those drawings away, if she had minimized something so important to Isabella, what else had she done? What other small, invisible cruelties had she committed when he wasn't looking? The official investigation began in full force. Robert mobilized all the resources he had. He hired private detectives, offered very high rewards, and made appearances on the country's main news channels. Isabella's photo was everywhere: newspapers, television, social media. The billionaire businessman desperately seeks his missing daughter. The story had everything the media loved: drama, wealth, mystery. But as the cameras rolled and reporters made their sensationalist reports, Robert was crumbling inside. Every minute that passed was torture. Every phone call that brought no news was a blow. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He just went around the city, from police station to police station, from community to community, showing his daughter's photo to anyone who wanted to see. It was during these searches that Robert began to notice things. Small details that had previously gone unnoticed, the way Patricia always had a ready excuse, always had a perfect explanation for everything. How she worried more about what the neighbors and the press were saying than about the fact that Isabella was missing. How she never, at any point, shed a genuine tear. On the third night after the disappearance, Robert could no longer ignore his suspicions. He hired a private investigator, not to look for Isabella, but to investigate Patricia. What he discovered left him nauseated. Patricia Anderson was not who she claimed to be. Her real name was Patricia Silver, and she had an extensive history of relationships with wealthy men. 5 previous marriages, all ending in contentious divorces, all with her leaving with a significant amount of money. She was an expert at manipulating lonely and vulnerable men, exactly as Robert was when he met her. The investigator brought more devastating information. During the 4 months of their courtship, Patricia had begun to transfer sums from the joint account that Robert naively had created to facilitate household expenses. Small amounts at first, which gradually increased. She had also tried, twice, to convince Robert to put properties in her name, always with convincing excuses about tax planning and asset protection. But what shocked Robert most was the testimony of one of the maids who had been dismissed shortly after the wedding. The woman recounted, with tears in her eyes, how Patricia treated Isabella when Robert was not at home. The constant criticisms, the coldness, the deliberate isolation. She had tried to warn Robert before being dismissed, but he, blinded by the illusion of having found a companion, did not listen. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Carlson," the former maid said, wringing her hands nervously. "I should have insisted more. I should have protected that girl. She was so quiet, so sad. Always trying not to bother, always apologizing for existing. A child shouldn't be like that." Robert listened in silence, each word a knife digging deeper into his chest. He had failed Isabella in every possible way. He had chosen work over presence, money over love, and in the end, he had brought into the house someone who made the girl's life unbearable. He was guilty, not Patricia, but him. Because even if she was cruel, he was the one who allowed it, who validated it, who ignored the signs. On the 6th day of the search, Robert received an anonymous call. A hesitant male voice claimed to have seen a girl similar to Isabella in a working-class district in South London. Robert wrote down the address and went immediately, without notifying the police, without notifying Patricia. Something told him he needed to do this alone. He arrived at the indicated location as the sun was setting, tinging the sky red. It was a poor community, with crowded houses and dirt roads. So different from the world of concrete and glass he built. He began to show Isabella's photo to people, and for the first time in days he saw recognition in someone's eyes. An elderly lady sitting at her doorstep looked at the photo and nodded. "I saw that girl. She's with Julia and Clara down the street. Those two orphaned girls who live alone. We try to help as much as we can, but it's hard. They're good girls, hard-working." Robert felt his legs give way. Isabella was there in that community, living with other vulnerable children. His daughter, who had everything, chose to live with those who had nothing. The meaning of that was devastating. He thanked the lady and followed the indicated direction, his heart beating erratically. It was then that he saw Julia, the 16-year-old girl who would be the bridge to reunite with his daughter. She was returning from a day's work, carrying heavy bags of recyclable material. Robert approached, holding the poster with Isabella's photo, and asked the question that would change everything. "Do you know this girl?" And when Julia answered yes, when she said that Isabella had run away because she felt more alone in the mansion than on the streets, Robert finally understood the magnitude of his failure. He had built an empire, but lost what truly mattered. He had given everything except the essential. And now there, on that dusty road, he would have to prove that he deserved a second chance. "Please," Robert pleaded, his voice breaking. "Take me to her. I need to ask for forgiveness. I need to fix this. No matter what it takes, I will fix it." Julia studied him for a long moment, assessing whether she could trust this man in a crumpled suit with desperate eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I'll take you. But you need to understand one thing. She's fine here. She's safe. She's being cared for. If you come back and don't change anything, if you continue to be the absent father you were, it will be better to leave her here with us." Robert swallowed hard, accepting the harsh truth of those words. He followed Julia through the labyrinth of alleys, each step weighing like lead, until he finally reached that precarious shack where his daughter had found what the mansion never offered: true warmth. The hug between father and daughter inside that precarious shack lasted an eternity. Robert held Isabella as if he was afraid. She would disappear again, and the girl, initially stiff and scared, slowly began to relax in her father's arms. It was the first true hug they had exchanged in months, perhaps years. A hug without haste, without her father looking at his watch, without concern for meetings or phone calls. Just a father and a daughter, reconnecting through silence and touch. When they finally separated, Robert wiped the tears from Isabella's face with a gentleness she didn't remember him possessing. "I'm sorry, Bella. I'm sorry for everything. I was a horrible father. I thought giving money, giving things was enough, but it wasn't. You needed me and I wasn't there." Isabella looked at her father with those big, honest eyes. "I just wanted you to see me, Daddy. That's all. I didn't need toys or expensive clothes. I just needed you." The words were simple, but they carried an overwhelming weight. Robert nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he looked around the shack, seeing for the first time the conditions in which his daughter was living. The dirt floor, the walls that barely held up, the thin mattress that served as a bed. And there, observing everything with a mixture of pride and caution, were Julia and Clara, the two girls who had taken in his daughter when he failed. Robert stood up and walked to Julia. He had many questions, but only one thing truly mattered at that moment. "Thank you. Thank you for taking care of my daughter when I wasn't doing it. Thank you for giving her what I should have given her: security, Warmth. Love. Julia crossed her arms, still defensive. I didn't do anything special. Any decent person would have done the same. The question is, what are you going to do now? Are you going to take her back to that house where she was unhappy? Are you going to continue working 16 hours a day and leaving her alone with that woman? The mention of Patricia made Robert's face harden. No, that woman will not come near Isabella again. I already know everything. I found out who she really is, what she was doing. And as for work, that will change too. My daughter is more important than any business. What about us? Clara asked in a small voice, holding Julia's hand. Will Bella leave and we'll never see her again? Robert looked at the two sisters, at those children who survived on so little but had so much to offer. An idea began to form in his mind, an idea that was perhaps the only true way to atone for his mistakes. No, you won't lose Isabella, because you're coming with us. Julia looked at him suspiciously. What are you talking about? I'm talking about giving you what you deserve. A real home, food on the table, an education. Isabella told me you took her in, made her feel part of a family. Now I want to do the same. For you, I want you to come live with us. Not as maids, not as charity, as family. Julia remained silent, processing the offer. It was tempting, frighteningly tempting, but she had learned to distrust promises that were too good to be true. And when we annoy you, when we don't know how to use a fork and knife properly, when we speak incorrectly, when your rich friends look at us strangely, what will happen then? Robert knelt to be at the height of the two girls. Then I will learn to be patient. I will learn that what matters is not how you use a fork and knife, but the kindness you have in your hearts. And as for my rich friends, they can go to hell. If they don't accept you, they're not the friends I want to have. It was Isabella who broke the impasse. She stood up and walked to Julia and Clara, taking both their hands. Please come with us. I don't want to lose you. You're my sisters now. Clara looked at Julia with hopeful eyes, and the older sister finally relented. All right, we'll try. But if things get bad, if you go back to being the absent father you were, we'll leave. And this time we'll take Bella with us. Robert agreed with a solemn nod. Fair enough, I accept those terms. The return to Regent's Grove was surreal. The three girls huddled in the back seat of Robert's car, Isabella in the middle holding the hands of her new sisters. Julia and Clara looked out the window with a mixture of fascination and fear, watching the landscape change from simple houses to gleaming buildings, from dirt roads to wide tree-lined avenues. When they arrived at the mansion with its automatic gates and perfectly manicured gardens, Clara whispered, Are we really going to live here? Yes, you are, Robert replied, and for the first time in days there was a genuine smile on his face. This is your home now. Patricia was in the living room when they entered. She immediately stood up upon seeing Isabella, her face taking on an expression of theatrical relief. Isabella! Thank goodness you're all right. I was so worried. But then she noticed Julia and Clara, dirty and in torn clothes, standing timidly behind Robert. Her face changed, the mask of concern giving way to disdain. What are these girls doing here? Robert, they'll get the whole house dirty. Send them away and call the police to take them back where they came from. Robert walked slowly towards Patricia, his face a mask of contained rage. These girls are staying. They are the ones who are home now. You are the one leaving. Patricia gave a nervous laugh. Don't be ridiculous, Robert. I'm your wife. You can't just kick me out. I can and I will. Robert opened the briefcase he was carrying and threw documents onto the coffee table. I know everything, Patricia, or should I call you Silver? I know about the previous marriages, the frauds, the illegal transfers. I have proof of everything. And more importantly, I have witnesses to how you treated my daughter, how you humiliated her, isolated her, threw away her most precious things. Patricia paled. She tried to argue, to fabricate excuses, but Robert gave her no room. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and leave. Anything you bought with my money stays here. My lawyers are already preparing the divorce petition for fraud. You will not take anything that doesn't belong to you. You'll regret this, Patricia. Spat the words with venom. I'll destroy your reputation. I'll tell everyone that you kicked me out of the house, that you preferred 2 street tramps to your own wife." The words were a mistake. Robert took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. "Be careful what you say about them. These girls have more dignity and character in their little finger than you do in your entire body. Now get out of my house before I call the police." Patricia realized she had lost. She stormed upstairs furiously, and half an hour later she was leaving through the door, with 2 suitcases, casting one last hateful glance at everyone. A glance that Isabella received without fear, protected by the presence of her father and her new sisters. The following months were transformative. Robert kept his promise. He delegated the executive presidency of the company to a trusted partner and took on only an advisory role, working from home most of the time. For the first time in years, he was present. He woke up with Isabella, had breakfast with her, took her to school, helped with homework, and they had dinner together every night. The conversations that were once mechanical and superficial became deep and true. Julia and Clara gradually adapted. At first everything was strange and intimidating. The huge house, the individual rooms, the absurd amount of food. Julia refused to stop working completely, insisting on helping wherever she could. Robert respected this, understanding that work was part of her identity, of her strength. So he included her in the family business, teaching her about civil construction, taking her to visit construction sites. Julia absorbed everything with an intelligence sharpened by survival, and Robert saw immense potential in her. Clara, on the other hand, flourished differently. She was enrolled in the same school as Isabella, and for the first time in her life had access to regular classes, to playing with other children, to a real childhood. She gained a little weight, her face losing that hungry look, and her smile became even more frequent. Mrs. Benedicta, Robert's mother, visited the house frequently now, finally able to exercise the role of grandmother she had always wanted. She taught traditional recipes to the 3 girls, told stories of Robert's humble childhood, and became a fundamental figure in the reconstruction of that family. "I told you, my son," she said one day, watching the 3 girls playing in the garden. "I told you that you were running from the pain, but you found your way back, and you brought 2 more blessings." Patricia's divorce was resolved quickly. With all the evidence of fraud and emotional abuse against Isabella, she had no basis to demand anything. She left Robert's life the same way she entered it, quickly and leaving nothing of value. He never heard from her again, and that was exactly what he wanted. A year after the reunion in the outskirts, the family was complete and transformed. Robert had aged, but in a different way. No longer the aging of stress and exhaustion, but of wisdom and peace. Isabella was no longer that silent, scared girl. She spoke, laughed, played. She had therapy once a week and slowly processed the traumas, building a confidence that previously didn't exist. Julia was studying civil engineering at one of London's best universities, with a full scholarship that Robert insisted she accept. She maintained her independence, working part-time at the construction company, but now had a safe roof and a family that supported her. Clara was discovering herself through art, drawing constantly, and Robert made a point of framing each work, hanging them on the walls alongside Marina's memories. One Saturday night, everyone was gathered in the living room, not the formal drawing room that Patricia had insisted on keeping immaculate, but the family room that Robert had renovated to be comfortable and welcoming. Large sofas, soft blankets, a television where they watched movies together. Isabella was lying between Julia and Clara, the 3 watching a comedy while eating popcorn. Robert watched from his armchair, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Isabella noticed her father's gaze and smiled. "What are you thinking about, Daddy?" Robert felt his eyes well up but didn't try to hide it. "I'm thinking about how I almost lost everything, how I almost lost you, and how lucky I am to have a second chance, to have you 3. You are my greatest treasure, not the buildings, not the money. You." Julia cleared her throat, moved. "You know, when Bella showed up that morning, wet and scared, I thought I was just helping another lost child. I didn't imagine I was gaining a family, a real family." Clara snuggled closer to Isabella. "Me too, I always wanted a sister. Now, I have 2. Isabella hugged the two of them, then extended her hand to her father. "And I have my daddy back. The real daddy, not the one who only showed up to sleep." Robert joined them on the sofa, the four people who now formed his family. A family that was not perfect, that had scars and difficult stories, but that was real. That was built on solid foundations of love, presence, and commitment. That night, as the girls finally fell asleep after the movie, Robert stayed awake a little longer watching them. He thought of Marina, how proud she would be of the man he had become. Not the successful businessman who built skyscrapers, but the present father who built memories. He whispered a silent thank you to her, to Julia, to the life that gave him a second chance. Because Robert had finally understood the most important lesson. True luxury does not reside in mansions or bank accounts. It resides in bedtime hugs, in dinner conversations, in shared laughter, in the certainty that you belong and are loved. It resides in the people who stay, who care, who choose to be present even when it's difficult. And as sleep finally reached him, Robert knew he had found his way back home. Not the house of bricks and cement, but the home that is built within the heart, brick by brick of love and presence. A home that no storm could tear down, because it was founded on what truly matters. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Robert, Isabella, Julia, and Clara has touched your hearts deeply. This narrative reminds us that family is not defined by blood or wealth, but by presence, care, and true love. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring narratives that celebrate the complexity of life, the challenges of parenthood, and the transformative power of unconditional love. Let us know in the comments which moment of the story moved you the most, or share your own experience about family and new beginnings. Your story can inspire others who are going through similar situations. Don't miss our next content, as we will continue to bring stories that warm the heart and renew faith in human kindness. Until next time, and remember, it's never too late to be present in the lives of those we love.